Time for another board game review, and this time we have the game Trickdraw. This was sent to me by Good Games Publishing and is designed by Blake Propak and Morteza Rohaninejad. You're our magic flippin' cowboys. Play a card face up or down to craft tricky combos and outsmart your opponents in this magical Western tableau building game. Let me show you how to play. So in Trickdraw, you are trying to get 10 victory points. There's a deck of cards here, and each player starts with 2. So, on your turn, you draw a card. And then you can play one card from your hand to the table in front of you. Face down is 1 point or face up to activate it. So, I could put this prophecy card down, face down. You can see that's 1 point. Or, instead, I can play a card face up. Like this diplomacy card. Ongoing effect, your cards have 1 less discard cost. So, either play a card face down or face up. Once you play that card, then you can activate any number of your face-up once per turn cards once each. So, let me just show you what some of those look like. So let's say I had these cards. This one says once per turn discard a card to play a card, or once per turn discard a card to draw a card. However, if I have diplomacy, that means I can ignore that discard cost. And I can activate each of these once per turn. Now, instead of playing a card on your turn, you can instead abstain from both playing a card and using your abilities, and instead just draw 2 if you want more choices for your next turn. Now, as you play cards, you put them in a row in front of you. They tell you to not rearrange them because part of this is they want you to try to memorize what your cards are, or your opponent's cards are, because these cards can flip over during the game. Let's just go over some other cards. There are cards that do stuff on reveal, like Wrangle. On reveal, draw 1 card, then swap your hand with a rival's hand. So, whether I played it in front of me for that turn, I would do it, or if it were face down and it flipped over by another card, I would do that effect as well. Because some cards do stuff like Trickdraw, for example. Whenever this card is revealed, you discard a card, steal a rival's face-up or face-down card, you may flip it. So you would steal a card. So if I stole it, or let's say I stole this card and put it into my row, and I flipped it, oh, it's an on-reveal effect. Discard a card to look at the top 3 cards of the deck, put 1 back on top and draw the other 2. So yeah, on-reveal cards, ongoing cards, once per turn cards. Those are the different types of cards. Now, as I mentioned, you are trying to get to 10 points. When a player reaches 10 points through any combination, for example, some cards give you points depending on what other cards you have. Let me just show you some examples. Like Local Hero, this is an ongoing effect. It's worth 3 points if over half of your cards are face down. Another example of this type of card is a Rally card. This is an ongoing effect. It's worth 1 point for each face-up rally you have. So, whether it's a combination of these cards or face-down cards with the points, once somebody hits 10 points, then you trigger the end game showdown. So, the person who triggered it will get 2 extra cards from the deck face down in front of them as 2 extra points. Then the other players each get a turn to try to do a showdown. So on your turn, you just do a regular turn. You can either play, you can play a card and do abilities. The twist in the showdown phase is that all players who tie on points at the end of the showdown are eliminated. So it doesn't matter if you have the most points. If you tie with anybody else, you're out. Then whoever is the surviving player with the most points is the winner. If there's a tie in that regard, there is no winner. And that is pretty much the game. You, on your turn, play a card, face up or face down, do a once per turn effects, or draw 2 cards if you want more cards. I guess the other thing to show you is just some other examples of cards. Preparation, ongoing. When you play a card face down, flip this card face down, and then draw a card. Bewitched, on reveal, choose 2 players. Flip 1 card owned by each of the chosen players. There's even stuff like the Key, ongoing effect. If you also have the treasure or the temple face up, you win. So, bunch of kooky cards, bunch of different effects. And you're just trying to get to 10 points and stay on top. And that's the game. So I think there are some decent ideas here, but I'm not sure how successfully the game pulls them all off. I think the best part of the game is trying to make combos with your cards, because there are some fun ways to get points, or ways that cards can, interact with each other with flipping them and activating them. However, because there are these cards that activate when you flip them face up, sometimes turns can get needlessly complicated. which I guess is kind of funny and fun in that Magic the Gathering sort of way, like, okay, I flip this, and then I do this, and I do this, and I do this. But I feel like this game wants to be a light game, and I mean, it is. I'm not saying it's a heavy game. But when the cards can trigger each other so frequently, it can feel like the game is veering away from light party game to kind of annoying to manage. I actually like the idea of playing the cards and flipping them face down to make them points or not points. However, because the game is so dependent on making sure you hit a certain number of points, it can be a little tedious asking other people, how many points do you have? Or checking, how many points do you have? Cards have effects on them, like I mentioned, like, it's this many points for this many cards, or it's this many points if more than half of your cards, whatever. There are all these different conditions. I feel like the game needed to provide some sort of like counter or tracker to display how many points you have at any time, because you're going to be asking your opponents all the time anyway, so just have it an easy way to see what people have in front of them. The game also wants to be this kind of like memory game, like, okay, I need to remember all the cards my opponents play, but you play so many cards, I just feel like it isn't really that feasible. The end game showdown thing sounds more interesting than it actually ends up being. Oftentimes, if you just have one more turn, you don't really sometimes have the cards to try and go for any sort of comeback. So trying to aim for specific totals, like I'm going to make this total the exact same as someone else's total, or trying to overtake the lead, it just feels sometimes like very arbitrary, or like I'll never be able to do it. Like it's just, I don't know. It sounds cool, but ultimately I feel like there's a lot that's out of your control. I think overall this isn't a bad game, but this classic example of, I feel like it's trying to be two different games, and it doesn't really work as either for me. If you want like a purely light sort of chaos party game, the combos and rules are a little too fiddly or overly complicated for that. But if you want that kind of mean, take that combo-y card game, I don't think there's enough meat on these bones to provide enough depth or decision making. Yeah, there's some, but not enough to feel substantial, so it kind of just awkwardly sits in the middle. I think the art is nice, I think the ideas are decent, but I thought this one was just okay. It needed to go one direction or the other. Light, silly party, or give it some more meat. This middle ground just doesn't feel satisfying to me.